Welcome to the second episode on ease of doing business. Let me pick up the thread from where Mr. T R Rustagi, who was talking about the proposed GST in the last episode. Let us go straight to Mr. Anil Bhardwaj, who would share with us what sort of ease he is looking for the small and micro units in the proposed GST architecture.
I think before I take up the GST part, I would like to say there are two critical important issues that would take care of many problems that MSMEs face, whether starting a business or continuing with the business. One is that we need to have a credible grievance redressal system. There are n number of agencies and they are doing an important job, whether it is pollution control, whether it is starting a business and municipalities and electricity and so on and so forth. So there has to be a credible system that if I have a problem, if I am starting a business or if I am running a business, which industry, which institution I should go to get my problems resolved. Secondly, such a system should be able to capture that what are the issues which are frivolous, which are systemic, so that a policy change can ultimately, it should lead to. The second part is that we are talking about entry of business, we are talking about continuation of business, but nobody is talking about exit of business. What happens if industry fails? What happens if the business fails? Businesses will fail all the time.
Absolutely.
But there is no mechanism whatsoever. India is the only country in the world, you would be surprised, of our size that does not have any insolvency and bankruptcy mechanism, neither for the large industry or for the small industry. For the large industry, we still do have some defunct BFR mechanism. But for MSME, there is no such thing. For individual, there is no such thing.
Correct.
I mean, how can we have a competitive economy without having a Chapter 11 equal or Chapter 13 equal of United States?
Right.
And finally, coming to the GST part, I think you very rightly pointed out that this whole discussion is still happening very hush-hush. I mean, industry associations, people who are ultimately going to the part of it are not consulted, are not, you can say, allowed to raise their voice. For example, MSMEs are going to be one of the major beneficiaries of a better system, right, as well as they may be hit if problems are there.
I want to add further, when he's talking about SME and MSME sector, excise exemption is up to 1.5 crore. To our great surprise, this 1.5 crore is continuing for last 10 years. Look at service tax exemption, 10 lakh rupees, and for VAT you got different threshold amount. I'm saying that if we at all we have to provide support to SME and MSME sector, we have to see what kind of threshold exemption they require. This 1.5 crore which is existing for last 10 years, you know, inflation is 10% around. It has to be increased appropriately.
Okay, so we will move little away from the taxation, and we will move to some of the other parameters which are equally relevant so far as World Bank study is concerned. And again, 31st May is the deadline from the World Bank perspective. Whatever reform India is going to undertake and roll out in the next 2 months, those will be taken into account for the ease of doing business report 2016. So, some of the parameters for instance, registering property, that is another very important dimension.
Which
for
one?
Doing registering property, sir.
Registration.
Yes, registration of the property, sir. Maybe, you know, your experience from the industry perspective will be very relevant.
Registration of property, again, I mean, we are in a very peculiar situation. In most of the country, if you take the word also, it is about registering. So, there is some fees for registering that this particular property is in your name, that's all. But unfortunately, it has become a revenue instrument. It was never supposed to be a revenue instrument. So, it should have been very minimal charge, like for registering a license, you know, it's a license, nothing else. It only shows that this particular property is in the name of ABC, that's all. So, globally, I mean in USA for example, the registration charges are very, very less. So, that means the cascading effect of this tax is very low. But in India, the rate being so high, 10 to 12%, the cascading effects become so high that after 3 or 4 turns, the cost doubles. And that's what is happening. So, that means, first of all, it discourages people to register property. So, most of the transfers are taking place without registering it. And without the registration, because the property title is not in my name, so you cannot take advantage of it as a collateral and raise loan.
Absolutely.
So it has created a vicious cycle for a very large number of MSMEs to raise capital because we do not have right property titles.
Absolutely.
The second issue with this regard is, I mean, apart from the cost, is that, you know, that once you have taken the property, once you have given like a municipal corporation or development authorities in other cities, that for every small change you have to again go back to them and seek their permission to change.
Absolutely. So that brings us to two issues. So one is that it has a significant importance so far as the black money generation is concerned.
Right.
And secondly, so it has a GST aspect. The stamp duty, for instance, you know, if states could have agreed, then it could have become a part of GST.
Absolutely.
The ease of business is, ease of doing business is that.
Yes.
Ease of business is
doing recommended
not that. Yes.
It should be allowed, it should be vettable.
There's a huge... I want to just add further, black money generated from real estate is known to everyone. When stamp duty rate is 10% around, why this black money is coming into the system? It is coming because rate is too high.
So the actual solution to black money problem lies in, actually improving the ease of doing business rather than, coming up with an independent legislation. Now we have a parallel legislation, the black money legislation. Of course, we will not touch that issue today, but of course, we will go to now, of course, another very important point, the trade, the trading across border. The India rank is 126 out of 188. So 126th rank is ours, and that is trading across border. Then they are talking about export, import, and this is so vital for our economy, so vital for managing the CAD, the current account deficit. So vital for stabilizing the rupee vis-a-vis dollar in the forex market. So vital for so many macro variables in the economy. So maybe, sir, we will talk about this, the export-import side. Anilji will...
Actually, I would like to say two things here. One is that when we are talking about trade across borders, one is the tariff part of it. The second is the non-tariff issues. So far as tariff part goes, I think after WTO, most of the things are sorted out. There is not much of issue here. It is the second box of non-tariff barriers, TBTs and so on, that are creating a huge problem for, particularly for micro, small and medium enterprises, MSMEs. And mind it, when we are talking about World Bank report, maximum inputs are coming from the MSMEs. What happens here is that, for example, theoretically we are allowed to export shrimp to USA. But practically we are not allowed. Why we are not allowed? Because our testing labs are not recognized in the USA. So that means for each and every product, food or pharmaceutical or other things, we have to have mutual recognition agreement, typically called MRAs, between the nations, so that whatever we are getting tested here, there is equivalent laboratory there that recognizes that test.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, not much work has been done in India, not even importance has been accorded to this issue, and at least with the countries which are of our interest, like developed countries, or in our case like East Asian nations, ASEAN, CMLV countries and so on, where we want to export. Even with them, we have not been able to identify the labs and ensure that MRAs are signed. Without that, much of it, remain potential, but it's never realized. I mean, we can export quite a lot. I mean, India, in many areas we can export, but unfortunately we have not been able to do because we have not accorded enough attention.
Somehow, probably the focus of the Ministry of Commerce, the DGFT, they are wasting their time on different non-priority areas. They are not looking at the problem at the ground level, and then accordingly taking initiatives to, for instance, recognizing some of the labs abroad, which are going to be, beneficial for us, for our exports. So what happens, what generally, the most of the policymakers, they are busy doing what? I mean, recently, sir, I saw one press release from DGFT talking about that, so far as shipping bills are concerned, or maybe imports are concerned, the number of papers, the returns and documents which are required to be filed and attached, it has been reduced from 10 to 3 or 7 to 3.
That's not an issue actually.
And they say that they take huge credit. We have done it. I'm little. It was so surprising for me, so when I was going through that initiative, And I found that the ground level issues, for instance, Mr. Bhardwaj is talking about.
Well, these are all incremental changes.
These are incremental changes, absolutely.
You require a major policy change in all these areas.
Right, sir.
And maybe in the bureaucratic thinking, I mean, sometimes you are actually bogged down by these technicalities. So in the bureaucratic procedure, sometimes the innovative ideas are not coming forth very easily. That is the inherent drawback of a bureaucratic system.
Right.
Because when you work in a bureaucracy, it becomes difficult for you to think of out-of-box ideas or innovative ideas. So these ideas have to come from outside only, or you are exposed to the outside world only, then these ideas come. So they claim that they are having a lot of interaction with the trade and industry, and they are having several councils and several bodies in the Commerce Ministry, in the DGFT for that purpose. And their claim is that we are regularly interacting to get new ideas, to bring to focus the sharp issues which are facing the trade and industry, and then they are announcing changes year after year. So maybe that from their point of view they are doing that exercise, but maybe it is not adequate.
Maybe Mr. Suraj could throw some light that, I mean, our policymakers, it's not that they are not working, they are working, probably sometimes overtime. But the point is that, some of the very fundamental things for doing business, or maybe the ease which you are referring to, which is a little more holistic, more organic, I mean, keeping in mind that what happens, how can you measure all these things? What exactly needs to be done in terms of, I mean, naturally overnight we cannot overhaul the entire bureaucracy. It's not possible. So what is your suggestion as a think tank spokesperson?
First thing, as I said, the many policy measures that are implemented in other countries are marked by peculiar difficulties when it comes to India. It's a large country, even with all our limitations, still growing at 7.2%, whereas countries with better ease of business are not growing so well. So the essentiality of ease of business must be seen as a way of getting to double digit. Okay, that particular perception has not yet crept in. The second point is that the Indian public administration system is marked by extreme centralization and extreme compartmentalization. As a result, decision making and to implement a decision taken in Delhi, okay, in Tirunelveli in Tamil Nadu or in Kokrajhar in Assam becomes a very complex exercise. So certainly we need to find a better way of making sure that policy decisions are taken at the level where they can be implemented visibly and clearly. Okay, therefore, we need to focus, as I mentioned earlier also, at the level of the local authorities, because if they can be the predators, they also need to have the responsibility and accountability to be the promoters. It's very difficult to hold the finance minister to account with regard to how easy it is to set up a business, say in Karnataka. Or even the finance minister of Karnataka, it's difficult to take into account.
So are you talking
Therefore,
about
local
a
accountability,
different kind of audit system?
Local accountability, local audit of a lot of, we have all these, business promotion events. Okay, I mean, of course, a state like Gujarat, I mean, the Gujarat ease of business is an integral part of Gujarat model, and that is what sold it to the rest of the country. But now many states are attempting, okay, to copy Gujarat, but they seem to be copying the events rather than the spirit behind it.
Since you touched upon export and import, see, this government has to come out with clarity. They first of all has to done away hassle in export. We know import is higher than export, but they have to done away hassle in export. At the same time, export related refunds should be granted on time, which is not there. Secondly, if you look at the Union Budget 2015, they have taken away the export related benefit on deemed export.
So that's a policy decision of the governments so far as export benefits to be granted or not. But we were talking about the ease part, I mean, ease part, the Prime Minister has given, as it is reported, a deadline of 2017 to all the secretaries of Government of India that India's ranking must be improved, and probably we should be targeting 50th rank. It should be less than 50th perhaps. So, I mean, how realistic do you think, this kind of target can be, and what is required to be done? If this target has to be realized, then what is required to be done? I mean, broadly, I will go by, from each panelist here, to suggest at least 2 or 3 steps quickly. 1, 2, 3, that if Prime Minister is serious about it, he is able to motivate the entire workforce in the government of India, top policymakers down the line, and everybody is working towards one goal, that India's ranking should move from 142nd to 50th rank. So what needs to be done? The 3 steps.
The first thing is that I really don't know that, what 10 steps or 3 steps need to be done to bring it down to 50. I don't know. And I think this is very impractical also to know. The reason being that what you can do is, you know of what you can do, but what you don't know is what other countries will do during this time. So they may do better than you, and your ranking may further go down, even if you are doing some reforms.
Right.
Having said so, the second point is that few things are there or have been there on table right for many, many years. I think instead of wasting much of time, we should try to see that these things are, for example, taken care of, some policy decisions are taken. For example, we have to have a grievance redressal system. Why there is no grievance redressal system? If there is a grievance redressal system for all other mechanisms, why not for people who are putting up industries, creating employment, creating opportunities, creating and also giving taxes? The second part is that not enough attention has been paid in India about the exit. Exit is something extremely important. Without exit, you will have the dead woods getting collected. More than 4 lakh small industries are under, they are called sick. So they are in suspended animation. All the resources, capital, infrastructure, it is logged. It cannot be redeployed unless some kind of a policy mechanism is existing so that they can file and go back to again. Absolutely. And third is financial sector reforms, which are mother of all reforms. So we have to break this thing that 80% of financial sector is controlled by public sector banks. This has to go, and we can't have a ranking. Because it's not just access to finance. Right. It has an impact about cost of finance, for example. Right. It has an impact, for example, whether you would have access to risk capital. And if you don't have access to risk capital, then how new industries would come. It would also whether people would like to invest more in the capital intensive industries, or whether they would like to go in services, as is happening in India. So cost of capital, supply of capital, all those things are interrelated with financial sector reform.
See, if really we want to see ease of business, GST is the mantra, goods and services tax. But for having goods and services tax, they have to come out with the draft rules and regulation so that we can contribute. We want a seamless flow of credit, which is being denied even today. Input and input services definition, there are so many restrictions you can't avail credit. For GST, development for the country, for the growth of the trade as a whole, ease of business, government has to come forward and take trade and the industry along with them so that we can contribute for the biggest indirect tax reform for the country.
Right. So that's a different kind of ease that he's talking about. The ease of paying less taxes. That's another tax. That's another dimension. We will touch upon that. Maybe Dr. Suraj would like to prescribe a couple of pills for the Prime Minister.
Pills are difficult to prescribe for the Prime Minister. Okay. The pills must be prescribed for the state governments.
Okay, that's wonderful.
Okay.
That's really wonderful.
Unless state governments come on board, ease of business, whether in terms of rank or value, will remain a pipe dream. So that's the first thing. State governments have to come on board. Their concerns and issues have to be understood. Absolutely. And they have to be given tools, dashboard, kits so that they can track what their own people are doing. That's the first one. Second, with regard very specifically, taxation is only one out of the 9 dimensions of the ease of business index. Okay, so we also need to have a conversation around others, and I'm fairly sure this particular channel.
We have just touched upon, but the other issues. One episode is not enough to touch all 10.
Okay, people talked about insolvency. Yes. Certainly, we need to have a restructuring code or an insolvency code.
This time, the Finance Minister has proposed bankruptcy now. So,
so
let's see how.
A committee has been set up. Yes. That committee, with all due respect, has functioned like a typical government committee. Not much dialogue with the ecosystem. Okay. So certainly we need to have a mechanism whereby industry and civil society is able to contribute to this particular discussion. Right. The second area, capacity building. Okay. For instance, we are looking at insolvency. Right. We should have a cadre of insolvency professionals. It's not a voodoo, it is a science, and we have to have people with the skills and in understanding. So certainly that is the second part that we really need to invest in. And in India, things will change only where the rubber hits the road. And therefore, ease of business at the local level must become an important point of subject for municipal administrations and local authorities.
Absolutely, even panchayats, etc. Yes, only then it will impact the common.
Because once panchayats and municipalities see some revenue and employment coming out of all of this, they will become a bit bolder and play the role of promoter rather than predator.
Absolutely, absolutely.
If we look at the history, the way we think, the way we practice, the way we announce policies, the way we announce changes, and the way actually it is implemented, there is a lot of gap in all these things. I mean, if we look at the history for the past several years, so the issue is that it requires a cultural change in thinking at all levels, not only at political level, but at bureaucratic level, at ground level, and it has to be a national effort. So that feeling has to come that India has to grow, India has the GDP should improve, India has a right to live a better way of life. So that feeling has to come in all aspects of the working in the society, not only at the political level, but at the ground level. For example, if you take tax administration, if tax administration you can improve, till today after so many years after independence, the tax departments are not able to gain confidence of the taxpayers. So their ranking is very poor. I mean, people feel that you should avoid tax department, you should not go to the tax. I know after 10 years after retirement that many people go only up to the level of superintendent or inspectors. They don't know who is the commissioner because they feel commissioner is a big boss and therefore it is no point in going to the commissioner or he may not hear me. So that is the kind of perception people have. So that perception has to change.
Right. So on this note, we will wrap up this discussion today, and there are many takeaways from all the panelists today. And of course, I fully agree with you, sir, that there is a need for some kind of a structural, cultural change in our thinking at all levels. Ultimately, it's not only government alone and the various arms of the government, other stakeholders in the economy. Everybody has to contribute to this to ensure that the ease of doing business rank of India, it improves, it attracts more investment, it generates more employment in the country, and everybody, I mean, as rightly you said, sir, that the right to a better lifestyle. So we are able to avail that. Apart from that, I fully agree with Mr. Bhardwaj that the grievance redressal system, although every government department has one system like this in place, but unfortunately they are like perhaps sleeping giant, or they are defunct, or they work occasionally. We have different kind of other suggestions coming from various other professions. Of course, policy dimension we can ignore, but the simplification part, the most importantly, the states and other authorities like municipal bodies, the local authorities must come on board, because ultimately the common man gets impacted by their small policy initiatives, and that is where the actual ease is required. So where large corporates are concerned, they can handle it. They can handle the cost also. But it is the small businesses, the medium businesses, the Aam Aadmi, that is where the ease is required. So let me thank Mr. Rustagi, Dr. Suraj Kumar, Mr. Bimal Jain and Mr. Bhardwaj for sharing wonderful thoughts and very ground level ideas, and for making this discussion very animating. Thanking you for watching us.